Hey, hi, hello friends, and welcome back to Em Reads Books. I'm Em, and I read books. So today is my September wrap-up. I can't even believe that I'm saying that. Like, September just flew by so fast. But in September, I read a lot of really good books. I also read a lot of really kind of books, some of which I'll discuss, and others that I won't, for sake of brevity. So in September, I read a total of 23 books, which is tied for my most books read in a month, like stat on Goodreads. Since July, I've been reading about 20 books a month, but I do read shorter books, and in October, those are going to start to get a little longer. Usually my books are around like 300, 350 pages, so I could read those easily, easily in a day, but I usually read them right before bed, so maybe 2 nights and I'll be done with it. So I think the first thing I want to talk about is the books that I really liked. So these are my 4 or 5 star reviews on Goodreads. Basically, I have a really dumb rating system, and that rating system is basically, it's a 1 if, it was just bad. Like, if I can't find anything redeemable about it. It's 2 if it was, like, bad, but I kind of liked it. 3 is kind of like a, I liked it, but I don't really have any strong opinions about it. 4 star is generally where I'm at if I liked it, but it just wasn't quite right. And this is a 100% subjective system. And then 5 stars is like, I'm looking at it and I'm like, wow, this book was amazing, I love it so much, and admittedly, there are some 4.5 stars in with the 5s, but a true 5-star book is a book that I read from the library and then buy. So that's sort of where we're at. So the first, really good book that I read in September was The Wicker King by Kay Ancrum, and this is it's a weird book. There's sort of no way around it. It's beautifully weird, and I loved the story. I loved sort of the multimedia of it all, which is honestly a really good way to get me in a book. It's just the truth. And I think it really set the tone for the month in the sense of, this is the best book that I've read so far this month. Let's see if you can do better. Then I also read Monday's Not Coming by Tiffany D. Jackson, which is such a beautiful book. The problem, I had one tiny problem with it, and that's why I rated it a 4 instead of a 5, and that's just that I didn't feel like there was enough build-up or foreshadowing for the plot twist. Which I'm not going to talk about what the twist is. Honestly, I'm probably not even going to tell you most of what these books are about, just because it's really hard. Well, first of all, half of these books are in my Playbookers TBR, where I say everything that's on the spine of the book, but it's also really hard once you've read it to not spoil it. And so for this one, her friend, I think Claudia is her name. Claudia's friend Monday goes missing, and she is trying to hunt her down, but she's so concerned because it doesn't seem like anyone seems to care. And so it's suspenseful, I would say. I don't think that it's much of a thriller. It's not really much of a mystery, but there's a lot of suspense in there, and there's a lot of commentary on some social issues. The next sort of 4 to 5 star book that I read was The Whisper Man by Alex North. And honestly, after reading The Shadows, I was super surprised that I liked this book as much as I did. Because, I don't know, I didn't feel like in The Shadows there was enough thrill to call it a thriller. But in this one, you have a serial killer and you have a small town, and it seems like events are repeating themselves. It was so gripping. I could not put it down. I think I fell asleep on the couch reading this book because I was so tired, but I didn't want to stop reading. So in a similar vein to this is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. Alright, and this may be an unpopular opinion, but I didn't like Lock Every Door that much. I gave it's a solid 4 stars for me, but like, ultimately, if when I'm reading something I'm reminded of Riverdale, that's sort of, that's where I draw the line. But, so Home Before Dark was actually the first audiobook that I have ever listened to, which made it a little bit special, but for this sort of multiple perspective formatting worked so well. And I liked that there were multiple plot twists in this, and just as soon as you think you have it figured out, things get twisted on you. And that's what I like, especially when looking back, everything sort of falls into place. That's the kind of thriller mystery that I want to read. And I thought that Home Before Dark did a really great job of it. It was super creepy, like real creepy. So another read that I really liked was My Calamity Jane, which is it's in a series of, one of them is about Jane Eyre, one's about Jane Seymour, and this is about Calamity Jane. And this book, it was so meta, and I loved it. And it's, you know, it's historical fiction, but they sort of laugh at themselves and they have humor in the senses when they're not being historical, and they know they're not being historical, and they tell you that they're not. But it's really fun if you go and you have the Wild Wild West and you add in werewolves. Like, I'm here for it, I love it, let's go. Basically, this book started me on a train of just 4 and 5 star reads, just that. So, next we have The Night Diary, which, it's just such a beautiful book. And, you know, we've talked about this one in my Playbookers TBR, but it's about a girl whose family is in Pakistan, and in the 1940s, when Pakistan became its own country separate from India, they have to travel back to India. And there were just so many things in this book that were heart-wrenching and, you know, made me feel things. And technically speaking, this would be maybe a middle grade book, but it was beautiful. And, I mean, this is a book that I think is gonna stick with me for a very long time. Then, you know, we're piling on. Then I read Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson, which I had been waiting for months. I read it in a single night. I could not put it down. It was so good. And there were so many elements of the book that, you know, it was talking about domestic abuse and the music industry and just like so many things. It was so good. And it was definitely more of a suspense than a thriller or a mystery, but there were elements of that put in. And I think that, I mean, honestly, I'm gonna read anything that Tiffany D. Jackson writes. Like, from now on, straight up, I'm just saying that. Her books are wonderful and I love them. So then, we jump into Anxious People, which was a Book of the Month recommendation. And, you know, I have a few problems with this book. I did rate it 5 stars. But it's really more of a 4.5. Because I loved this book, but the first 100 pages of this book sucked. Like, they really did. They were slow, and it was just like, it felt like you were trudging through it. But towards the back half, everything starts to sort of get into motion. You begin to understand all of the factors that put you in the situation of accidentally holding an apartment showing hostage. And I thought it was a really great commentary on mental health and sort of, you know, humanity as a whole. It just made me feel things, because I'm someone, I have anxiety, I have depression, I have mental health issues, obviously, and it spoke to me. That's what I'll say. Then I read Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman, which Neil Gaiman, the fact that he narrates his own audiobooks is so great, just because his voice is so pretty. It's just so, like, soothing. So I would listen to it when I went for walks, and it was really great. I got to sort of learn about the Norse pantheon while, you know, exercising, which is great. So I also read The Extraordinaries by T.J. Klune, and I talk about this a little bit in my weekend vlog. I liked it. I really did. I thought that there were... I think that he made some stylistic choices that were good, but, you know, from a reader's perspective, as, you know, we're sort of this omniscient being, I didn't necessarily like that I knew everything, but I know that that's what he was going for. Now, putting that in perspective with Recursion by Blake Crouch, where we know nothing. That's, like, basically it. And I'm not going to say anything about this book. This is literally me talking about books that I've read and telling you nothing about them. But for Recursion, going in blind to this is seriously the best thing that you could do. Like, 100%. Then, I read The Night Swim by Megan Golden, which, while I did figure out, you know, sort of, like, who the culprit was well within the books, I liked that it was a mystery that you could figure out, which, you know, sometimes people will write mysteries and they're obvious. For example, One by One by Ruth Ware, which is a 2-star read for me. It was too obvious. I liked The Hunting Party better. Honestly, you know, I've read so many books with sort of that Agatha Christie and then there were none idea. Oh, this was not good. Like, I don't understand it. But The Night Swim was great. Because here we're tapping into, so you have the podcast element of it, then you have the dual aspect of being in court, sort of trying to figure out what has happened in this sexual assault case, but then you also have a case from like a decade ago where it's an unsolved murder, but, you know, no one seems to think that it was a murder, and it's just so well constructed, and, like, I mean, let's be clear, we can say really quick what a perfect M book is. And A, it needs to have some kind of mystery in it, or like a really good plot. And ideally it has multimedia in it, just in the sense that like how in The Wicker King there were drawings and there were playlists and things like that, which I love to see because I feel like it helps you understand the characters better. And this was a good book. It was so good. Then I read The Poppy War, which is also really good. But I need to say, you know, as a reader, I read so many mysteries and serial killer books, and I watch Law & Order SVU, so I'm pretty desensitized when it comes to, you know, violence. And this book is messed up. Like, you have to remember that this is in war, and so there are elements of this that will probably make you go like, ugh, and then go back to reading. And despite that, I think that this is such a beautiful book. Because you get to follow Rin throughout her entire journey, sort of from humble beginnings to a military academy to beyond. But it's all sort of, it feels self-contained, even though it is a trilogy. I feel like I learned so much in this book and that I don't even know what's going to be in the next one. I'm excited to read it though, because The Dragon Republic just came out a little bit ago, and I'm here for it. And I also read Thin Girls by Diana Clark. So this book really hits home for me because I have an eating disorder, different from what's covered in the book, which is mostly anorexia. There's a little bit of bulimia in there as well, but it was just so nice to see a book about an eating disorder written with such care and understanding, and sort of not in a way that glorifies it. I've read several books when I was a sort of young whippersnapper that almost came off like they were encouraging it. And here that was not the case. And there's so much sort of commentary on the diet industry and codependence and dysfunctional relationships. It's just a beautiful book. I know all I say is this book is good and this book is beautiful. But this book has stuck with me and might make it into my top 10 for the year. Now, talking about the books that I didn't like as much. I've already mentioned One by One by Ruth Ware. I think that I've said this before and I'll say it again. The sort of killer here is entirely too obvious. I liked the tech startup, aspect of it, although it didn't feel to me like that the author actually knew anything about tech startups. And I just feel like a lot of the characters in the book made some really stupid decisions. Like, I just don't understand why if someone was just killed by someone in this place, that you would be like walking around alone. Another book that I read that I did not like was The Hive, which I liked the premise of it, which is that, in cancel culture, what if we instead of made that sort of into a justice system? But it was entirely too preachy. It didn't really make sense, and they were like, I like a good dystopian book, but this wasn't it. And then the last book that I read this month that I just really didn't like was The Dead Enders. I thought that it was boring and it was long, and I didn't even review this on Goodreads. I could not come up with the words for it. I felt like it was over dramatic. That it used mental health as a plot twist, which is just that I'm not here for that. But this was my reading wrap up for September. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of those books or if you liked them, or what your favorite book that you read in September was. And as always, keep reading.